All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, so we're going to get started here. If you are live and online with us right now in the chat box, we'd love to hear. You can message all panelists and attendees. You're welcome to ask questions. If you have not received a copy of your book, Creating a Tween Collection, please do let me know. I'm Kathy Lancaster, the Youth Services Coordinator here at the Library of Michigan. And we are very grateful to the Institute of Museum and Library Services for providing us with the funding to purchase copies of Creating a Tween Collection and getting them all out to you for use in your libraries. And we are also very lucky to have Karen Smith here with us, the author of the book, as well as a librarian over at the Livonia Public Library. And I am going to let Karen take over now and get us started. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Hello everyone, can you see my screen? I hope that everyone can see it. Okay, great. So thank you, Kathy, for allowing me to do this today. I'm Karen Smith, and I am the head of children's services at the Livonia Public Library. I have been working in libraries for over 20 years, which is hard for me to believe. I don't feel like I'm that old, but I am. And I am well versed in collection development and maintenance. So middle school patrons are my favorite patrons to work with. They are fun. They understand that not everybody can win. They can still be silly, and they are learning to speak for themselves and how to interact with peers and with other adults. They are beginning to use the library on their own, and they are a great patron resource for us to help us figure out what we want in our library going forward. So you guys are here because you are considering adding a tween collection to your library, and it probably seems like a very daunting task at this point. And it is time consuming and it is a lot of work, but it's worth it. Your patrons are going to love it. The Tween collection will fill many needs. It will make middle schoolers and their parents feel welcome in the library, and like the library has a place for them where they're not waiting in the vastness of the baby books in Juvenile and the very mature books that are often found in Tween now. So let's start with what consists of tweens, and there we go. Tween equals middle school, 5th through 8th grade. In some cases, it might be beneficial for you to look at how your school district separates middle school. Livonia actually has upper elementary, which is 5 and 6, and then they have middle school, which is 7 and 8, and then they do high school. Some cities I know do middle school as 6th through 8th grade. So if it makes sense for you, use what your school district does, and that might even help you when you go to present this idea to your stakeholders or when you're trying to explain it to patrons and other staff members. So the overall philosophy of tween collections. Collections are fluid. Your collections are ever changing. You are always updating and thinking about things that you want to add, thinking about things that maybe you no longer need. And a lot of kids' collections are based on popularity, especially fiction collections. It's usually the next big thing that you want to make sure that you have, while keeping in mind that you do need some classics and school requirements and things like that. Nothing is set in stone. You can always change where you place something. If you find that you have a book that you thought would be a great tween book and it's just not circulating for whatever reason, reconsider where you put it. Maybe it does actually belong in juvenile or teen, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. Tweens are diverse and challenging. We're going to talk a little bit about the tween brain and why they can be such a challenging population, but they are certainly worth the effort. And the main thing is tween collections act as a bridge between juvenile collections and teen collections. They are intended for kids who have outgrown Dogman and the Warrior series, but not quite ready for the novels of John Green and Ellen Hopkins. So, adolescent brain development, and I go into this in it's pretty detailed in the book. So if you want to read more about it, I would encourage you to do so. But just overall, a teen's brain develops at different rates. So cognitively, tweens are beginning to understand more complex subjects. They are learning to think critically. Their thinking goes from concrete to abstract. They are learning to set and attain goals, and they are learning their strengths and weaknesses. Their language, tweens like to say things for shock value. They will use a lot of slang. They may pick a fight for no reason just to see how that interaction is going to play out. Face-to-face communication can be hard with this age group for a variety of reasons. This is an age group, especially in today's world, that have grown up on devices. So they don't necessarily know how to interact face-to-face in the same way that we know how to interact face-to-face. And because a lot of their communication happens via some sort of device, it is likely that they will have a hard time maintaining eye contact, and they may mumble a little bit when they talk to you. So a little patience goes a long way with this age group. Emotionally, they can be volatile. They can be sweet one moment and having a meltdown the next over something that we might consider is minute, like a video game or the fact that the book that they want isn't in the building at the time. They can have a low level of frustration and they can be irritable. And the area of the brain that controls their emotions is not developed until around the age of 15, while other areas of the brain are developing much quicker than that. Physically, they may look a little bit older or younger than their actual age. It's hard for them to control their bodies. They're very similar to toddlers in that respect, where they really just can't sit still. They're going to rock in an unrockable chair. They might bump into things. They might feel the need to just touch somebody. That's all just because they have a hard time just sitting still. They also need a lot of sleep. Experts actually recommend 9 to 12 hours of sleep per night, and many of them are not getting that. So that's something to consider as well. They could just simply be tired and stressed. Socially, tweens need to learn how to behave in a variety of situations and how to interact with others. Peer pressure is at an all-time high, as is risk-taking behavior. And a lot of tweens feeling the need to fit in may participate in some negative risk-taking behavior just to get the approval of their tweens, of their fellow tweens. However, this can also be a great time of confidence building because they are more likely to take risks. They might consider trying out for that sports team or trying out for a new club or maybe the school play. And in doing this, they may find new friendships and opportunities through these extracurricular activities. Sexuality, they're starting to develop emotions and feelings of love and attraction. Some of those feelings may be confusing for them. They may have friends who are what we call boy crazy or girl crazy, or they may have some feelings of, I might like the same gender. I'm not sure if I am the gender that I was assigned at birth. They have a lot of things happening. Or they may feel nothing yet. Maybe they're not attracted to anybody yet. And they might be thinking, what's wrong with me? All of my friends are, starting to maybe think that they want a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and I don't want any of those things yet. So those are things that they're dealing with as well. And then they are learning to have relationships with authority figures. They feel the need for independence and they want to test their boundaries, but they also want the comforts of home, and they also want structure, and they like routine. And librarians can have a very positive effect in the lives of tweens. We can be a positive influence in their life because while we are authority figures, we don't necessarily set strict rules and implement punishments. We're much more likely to advocate for them. So now we know that their brains are all over the place. So what do they want going forward? Well, some of them want to hang out in groups and socialize with their friends, which also often involves a mobile device. They want to crowd around a computer playing video games or watching YouTube videos. And it's important to provide them opportunities to do that. Some tweens want to be left alone. Others seek out interactions with adults. Some will try to impress authority figures, and some will see how much they can get away with. Their need for independence and freedom is growing, but they still need a safe place with trusted adults who are available but not overbearing. A tween collection and a specialized space can accomplish all of these goals. By giving tweens a collection to call their own, a space to hang out with their friends, and a friendly librarian with whom to interact, tweens can navigate those awkward middle school years a bit more easily and come out prepared for the challenges of high school, all while learning to love the library and become lifelong readers and learners, because that's the whole point of this collection, right? It's to make them lifelong readers and learners. So what do tweens want? To read, because we need to know what they want to read in order to create this wonderful tween collection. So there was a great book that I used when I was researching the practical guide, and it's called Naked Reading: Uncovering What Tweens Need to Become Lifelong Readers. And it was written in a very fun, relatable tone, and I would recommend anyone to take a look at it. I found it very enjoyable. And so the 5 stages that they talked about were unconscious delight, reading autobiographically, vicarious experience, philosophical exploration, and aesthetic experience. So unconscious delight. The time in the tween's life when the real world drops away and readers become lost in a book. We all know that feeling, and we all love that feeling, and we certainly want to make sure that we are providing opportunities for that feeling for our tween patrons. Reading autobiographically. Tweens want to meet characters who share some of the same characteristics of their own lives. They want to see someone like them who is experiencing the same feelings and situations that they are, and they want characters who look like them. That's very important. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of diversity in this webinar, but I do have some resources at the end that you might want to take a look at, and I'm sure actually most of you already know about most of them. So it's important to make sure that your readers are seeing themselves in the books that you have in your collection. Vicarious experience. Some tweens want to read about people and experiences not like their own. They want to explore other cultures, other places, other times. Reading vicariously helps break down barriers and encourages the readers to understand the experiences of others. So you want to make sure that you have things that are going to intrigue them. You know, maybe they want to read about a different time period or a different culture or a different geographical place, or even just someone who has different religious beliefs than their own. Philosophical exploration. Sometimes tweens read to wrestle with larger questions in life. Who am I? Why am I the way that I am? What am I supposed to do with my life? This is the age where kids start thinking about things like that. They want to see how they fit into the bigger picture in their families, in school, in the world around us. They they need to know what other possibilities are there for them. They may be growing up in a household with very conservative or even very liberal beliefs, and they're just not quite sure they feel that way. So it's important to make sure that there's opportunities for them to explore other facets of the world for them. And then aesthetic experience, reading for the sheer beauty and pleasure that reading can bring. Books read for aesthetic experiences also contain passages, characters, scenes, and sentences that make us pause as readers, usually because we connect with the books in some specific way. Tweens will find favorite characters in these books and may even reread them, and we as adults know this feeling well. So tweens who read through all of these stages are more likely to become lifelong readers. Although almost everything librarians do help tweens and other young readers become successful literate people, an understanding of the publishing market and review sources can also help librarians make informed decisions, which will help to provide appropriate tween collections. So one of the things that I think is important is that we need to rethink the YA or teen classification in libraries. So typically, juvenile collections cover from birth to grade 6, and teen collections cover grades 6 to 12. And we all know that those are both huge developmental age ranges. Kid who is just starting middle school is still thinking about the comforts of home, and they're thinking about video games, and they're thinking about, you know, what they might do this weekend if they have a sleepover, where a junior in high school is going to be thinking about taking standardized tests or the ACT, SAT. They might be worried about school. They might be worried about getting a scholarship. They might have a job. So they are dealing with a lot of different things. And so to lump middle school in with high school actually does them a disservice. And one of the main things is some parents are concerned that there will be very mature themes in the teen collection. And I have actually seen firsthand where parents will not allow their middle schooler to browse the teen collection because there are things that they feel or their child simply is just not ready for. So having a specialized middle school or tween collection really goes a long way in giving tweens ownership of the library. So tweens are a very unique group of patrons who are still under the watchful eye of their parents in most cases. Tween literature continues to become edgier and tackle tough topics, and more authors are writing books with middle schoolers in mind. There's a lot more books that have middle school characters and deal with things that middle schoolers are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Kids in this age group are caught between wanting all the comforts and security of home and yet doing everything they can to find their independence. This is an age where book lovers may move away from the written word because juvenile books are too young and teen books are too much. And just the presence of a tween collection could make an entire group of patrons feel welcome and at home in your library. So a good tween collection will have appropriate books, both in content and intended audience, a welcoming space for kids to hang out, popular entertaining titles, required reading, and maybe some nonfiction, and a knowledgeable, fun librarian. Tween collections and spaces can help combat the challenges of keeping tweens engaged in reading and learning in general. Parents can often be our hardest customers to please. How many times have we heard that graphic novels are not real books, or I don't want my kid reading that, usually in reference to the latest book to movie title or whatever they've heard on the news or on Facebook. So this problem is exacerbated when a new sixth grader walks into the teen collection and discovers a book like The Hate You Give or 13 Reasons Why, which are of course fantastic books, but might not be quite appropriate for a sixth grader, or at least the parent doesn't think that they are appropriate. And then this entire section is closed off to these middle schoolers. And research has shown that one factor in creating lifelong readers is to let children choose their own reading material. Kids are more likely to have the opportunity to select reading materials if there is a space for tweens that includes books written with middle schoolers as the intended audience. So I know if you're here, you really want to create a tween collection, or at least you're really considering creating a tween collection. And I'm sure you have concerns, or I'm sure perhaps some of your stakeholders or other staff members have concerns. And one of the things that I heard when I was researching was nobody is asking for a tween collection or space. And this is probably true. But it's an invalid argument. And the reason being, most people don't understand what a tween collection or a tween space is. It's relatively new that libraries are even considering putting in spaces specifically for middle schoolers. So don't confuse something. Lack of knowledge does not necessarily mean that there's a lack of interest. People just don't necessarily understand that it's a thing. Another thing that I heard was tween collections will pigeonhole readers. Some librarians were concerned that if you have a tween collection and you have a space that's simply for middle schoolers, only middle schoolers will go in there and they won't go anywhere else. And if you're not in middle school, you won't be able to go in there. And we all know that that is not the case. We have teens who still browse in the juvenile collection because they like the books that are there, or they just want to reread something. And we have juveniles going into the teen collection looking for something. And as librarians, we know that all collections are for all people. So this area will simply just allow tweens to know that there's a specific place that might have items that are more geared towards them, but it's certainly not the only area that they can go to. Reading levels. Now, we all know about reading levels, and we all know how fun they can be to deal with. So there's too many systems. They're all proprietary. Schools don't necessarily use the same ones across the board. So tween collections are not about reading levels. Tween collections are about interest. These are the books that are written for middle schoolers. These are the books that middle schoolers will find interesting. It has absolutely nothing to do with reading levels. Lack of space. This one is an interesting one because you're not really going to need any new space. You simply need to rearrange your space because you already have tween books in your collection. Some of them are in juvenile and some of them are in teen, and you just need to find them and put them in a new space. But you don't need to create new space, you just need to reimagine the space that you already have. And the same thing goes for money. You're already buying these books. They are just simply going to be cataloged or linked differently. So you don't need any more space and you don't need any more money. You just need to reimagine how you use your space and redistribute your funds. So, and we'll go into that a little bit more at the end. So what is tween literature? What constitutes, what makes a book tween? So first thing is middle school. If the characters are in middle school, it's likely that it is a tween book. However, there are some middle school characters that do very well in juvenile. The Diary of a Wimpy Kid and the middle school series are both ones that do just fine in juvenile. They can be read by kids as young as 3rd grade. However, if you want to put them in tween, put them in tween, because remember, nothing is set in stone and collections are fluid. You also want to look at the storylines. What happens to the characters in the story? Are they going on a parent-free adventure? Are they dealing with discrimination or bullying? Is that based on race, culture, or gender? Are they being abused or neglected? What does the family dynamic look like? Is there a substance abuse or mental health issue? Does someone die? If so, is it tragic or unexpected? In some cases, it's the concept that makes it appropriate for tween. Books with dystopian societies or those dealing with social justice or injustice may belong in tween. Also, coming of age, sexual identity, and gender questioning begin to appear in tween novels. This, of course, can make parents and other grown-ups nervous. However, for tweens who are trying to figure out who they are and why they are having these feelings, these novels can be a lifesaver for them. And again, they may be dealing with feelings of love or attraction, or they may be feeling nothing at all. So having books that deal with first romance or first kisses or anything of the sort are also good to have. Other things, they may contain nudity, but not in a sexual way. It's going to be more likely like they saw someone naked, rather than a graphic description of someone being naked in a sexual way. The other thing is mild swearing, and that is going to be kind of based on your community standards. We all have those words that we know are completely off limits, but there are other ones that would be absolutely fine and completely appropriate in tween books. So, okay. So resources you can use as you are figuring out your tween collection and your tween books. You are an extremely valuable resource. You've gone to school, you've read articles, you read reviews, you are, if you're brand new and you don't feel like you're an expert in kids literature, you will be. You will continue to read things, you'll read the books, you will read reviews, you will continue to become more and more knowledgeable about your patrons and what they want and your community and what your community standards are. And those are all things that you can use as you form your opinions about what belongs in your tween collection. Other librarians. Librarians by nature are pretty helpful, and we like to recommend things to each other, and you can join listservs. And I'm sure many of you have, so you can see all of the book lists that come out, all of the book suggestions that come out. So, so use your other librarians that you know and just ask for help. Vendors. Sometimes vendors' emails have fantastic suggestions for new things coming out, or even things that maybe had slipped under your radar. And some vendors also now allow reviews to pop up when you're searching for books, so that is always good. That you can just go to a one-stop shop, which we're going to talk about that next with Novelist. Novelist K+8 is probably one of my favorite Mel databases. I use it all the time. You can go in, you can search for things, you can see a bunch of reviews in the same place, including there's Kirkus is in there, and School Library Journal, and we're going to actually go out into Novelist, and I'm going to show you how I use those to see which books would make a good, how I look at the books and how I figure out which ones belong in tween versus juvenile or teen. But before we do that, I want to talk about two different formats that are important to continue or to have in your tween collections. So the first one is novels in verse. Novels in verse help to create comprehension and fluency. kids who are reluctant readers may be more likely to pick up a novel in verse because there's less words on the page, right? They don't have to go through paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. They can get through a chapter in a short amount of time because there's just simply not that many words on the page. And some readers have commented that the verses are like tweets, and they are short and their brains have an easier time understanding what's going on. And I thought that was interesting that they compared them to tweets. And what a way to tap into this digital generation, but by adding more novels in verse. The other one is graphic novels. And I found a bunch of really cool things about graphic novels and the history of them, as far as what they thought was appropriate and what they didn't think was appropriate, and how publishers and vendors got around selling items that some people didn't like. So that's all very interesting if you want to take a look at it. It's in the book, but I just found it fascinating. And we all know that some people don't feel that graphic novels are real books, but we also know that they can be beneficial to reluctant readers as well. It gives them a chance to read not many words on the page. They can enjoy the illustrations, and it actually helps them comprehend better because they have to reconcile with the words on the page with what is happening in the picture. So graphic novels are great in increasing comprehension, especially for reluctant readers. So hopefully that's a little tidbit of information you can use the next time a parent says, I don't want my kid reading a graphic novel. So, and now a lot of classics are getting reimagined as graphic novels, which is nice. And there's also some nonfiction graphic novels that patrons are starting to discover and really enjoy.
Hey Karen, it's Kathy.
Hey.
So we had a quick question in the chat box about suggested tween book lists.
Okay.
And I mentioned that in the book everyone is getting, creating a tween collection, there are some book lists in Appendix A and B.
Yes.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so we are going to start evaluating what we have. So because your tween collection covers grades 5 through 8, roughly, you're going to find a fair amount of tween books already in your juvenile collection and in your teen collection. Getting started is the hardest part, right? Because you've got so many books in juvenile and so many books in teen. It's like, where do you even start? So start thinking about some of the series that you know might be more for those middle school students. So we have Percy Jackson would be one of them. Harry Potter is one that technically I think it belongs in tween, but a lot of librarians like it in juvenile or like it in teen. And again, it's when collections are fluid. So if you want to keep yours in juvenile or in teen, that of course it's going to be what works best for you. So, and as you use review sources, when you start looking, once you figure out the series that you know belongs in tween, and then you start looking at specific things, you want to look at the age recommendations that are found in the reviews. You want to look for comments about maturity in the books or comparison to other books. Similar to, you know, for kids who have outgrown Dogman, this might be the next thing for them. And then when the reviews are not consistent on age ranges, which a lot of times they're not, you want to see what happens in the story, and that will help you figure out exactly where the book that you're thinking about needs to go. So when you evaluate your collection, you want to look at your review sources. And I'm sure you guys are all familiar with these: Voya, Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal, Booklist, Hornbook, and Kirkus. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail with those because you guys know about them. What I really want to do, because I just noticed my time here and I'm running a little over, I want to talk to you guys about the meat and potatoes, how to physically start looking for those books. So we're going to look at sample juvenile titles. So this is taken from Novelist right here, The Summer of Bo and Todd. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this book, and it's one of those like, oh boy, this is probably a kid's book, but oh, I'm not sure I want to put it in the kids section. This is a great example of a tween book. It is a book written with middle schoolers in mind. It is about young middle schoolers. They are just beginning 6th grade, or they're going to be beginning 6th grade. And it's about something that could quite possibly be happening to any one of our tweens, and we know that. So this is a great book to put in your tween collection. It's going to be there for the kids who need it. And even if you have a teen who might need it, they're going to be able to find it in your tween collection as well, where it's going to get lost in your teen collection because a junior doesn't want to read about a 6th grader. And we know that as well. So George is another one. George is one that could easily go into Juvenile if you have the type of community that would be willing to be cool with that. In a more conservative community, it might be something that belongs more in tween. But again, that's something that you need to know your community and what your community standards are. Okay, and then we're gonna do 2 teen titles. We have Refugee, which is a historic novel. Actually, it has a few different time periods that it deals with. And this is another one that would be a great tween title. And Counting by Sevens, which has a 12-year-old girl who feels like an outsider, and is trying to figure out her place in the world after her parents are killed in a car crash. This one is almost a textbook tween book. So I have some Novelist screenshots in the slides, but I want to show you how to physically search in Novelist, just in case you guys are not familiar with it. And if you're not familiar with it, I would highly recommend getting familiar with it because Novelist is amazing. So I don't know, are you seeing the Novelist K+8, or do I need to do something different to share the screen? I think
Nope, we can see it. You're good.
Okay, so, okay, so you just want to go to Mel, and you guys all know how to go to Mel, and I'm sure you're familiar with most of the databases. So we're just going to do a quick search here for Beverly right here. And like I said, these are the screenshots that, that I saved for you so you can see them again. And we're just going to search. And it's going to pop up. Okay, so these are the things that you want to look for. So Novelist is going to give you an age recommendation.
Oh, Karen, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You tricked us because your slide is showing Novelist.
Okay, let me
go ahead and reshare to your web.
I will do that right now. Okay, let me see. There we go.
I thought you already had this page open. Sorry.
Okay. All right, here we go.
There you are. Now I can see your URLs.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so Novelist is going to give you a recommended age range. So this has ages 9 to 12, min-max grade level 5 to 7. So that's something that you can use when you're selecting. And then when you scroll down, you're going to see all of these great reviews. And it's going to, and all of these reviewers are going to give you a recommendation. So Booklist says it's 5 to 8. School Library Journal says it's 5 to 7. Publishers Weekly says it's ages 10 and up. And Kirkus gives it 10 to 14. So this one is pretty firmly in that tween area of what we're looking for. And then the other one is Strange Birds, which I thought was a super cool title because it has, of course, nothing to do with birds. It has to do with 4 different characters. A Field Guide to Ruffling Feathers. And so this is about 4 girls who are trying to shake up their sleepy Florida town. So if you're dealing with a book that has some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? If they're trying to take some sort of action, if they're trying to stop something or make something happen or change something, some sort of political or social change, you're probably looking at a tween book, because most elementary school kids aren't going to be quite there yet developmentally. And if you look at the grades here, we have 5 to 8. School Library Journal has it as 4 to 7. Publishers Weekly has it as 9 to 12. And Kirkus has it as 9 to 12 as well. So this would be one, it's not quite firmly in that tween area across the board. However, because it is dealing with some sort of social action, it's much more likely that it's going to be a tween book. So like I said, so you have these slides. They will be in your notes, so so you can take a look at those a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm just going to bump through these quickly so we can get beyond there. They were just backup in case, you know, technology. And okay, so now we are to carving out space. So you have the books, or you're thinking about what books that you want to put there, and then you need a spot to actually put them, right? So carving out space is the one thing that, like I said, was a big concern for everybody. So you want to do some weeding as you are going through selecting what you think belongs in your tween collection. As you're going through, you might find that there are books that really just aren't circulating well, and it could be that they're not circulating well because they're just not circulating well, or maybe they're not circulating well because the audience who needs them is not finding them. So you might want to consider that. You might have a book in teen that is a great book, but no one's finding it. So maybe throw it in tween and see what happens. If you're not familiar with the CREW method, I do have the link here that you can take a look at. It's a wonderful way to go through your weeding process, which some librarians love, other librarians consider it a necessary evil. So if you ever do need tips or tricks or motivation, CREW is a good place to go for that. And weeding will accomplish two things. It will help you find the tween books that are already in your collection, and it will free up space for your tween collection. So as you're going through your weeding process, just think about your policies. Condition of the books, circulation, are they circulating? Would they circulate better somewhere else? Availability, can you get the book in through interlibrary loan? So maybe it's not a book that necessarily works well in your collection, but if you can get it from another library, it will be there in case you do have a patron who wants it. And then if you're doing nonfiction, of course, is the book still accurate, or do we need to maybe update what's in the book? So, and then location. So now you have started your weeding, you've started figuring out the books that you want in your tween collection. And now, where exactly are we going to put it? Are we going to put it closer to juvenile? Are we going to put it closer to teen? And juvenile makes sense if you have parents who come to the kids with the library still. So if you have parents who have, say, a second grader and a sixth grader, and they come to the library as a family, you might want to put your tween collection closer to juvenile. That way the parent can still see where they're at, but will allow them a little bit more freedom to go into their tween space. So the tween will be able to explore, but the parent is still there for guidance. And it also provides a natural flow from juvenile to tween. Maybe you want to put it closer to teen. Maybe your library is close to a middle school, and you have a lot of middle schoolers who just come into the library after school all by themselves. So maybe it makes more sense closer to teen. It also provides more of a flow from tween to teen, because remember, this is a bridge. Tween collections are a bridge between juvenile and teen. Finally, wherever you have space. If you're able to move shelves around, that's great, but you might not be able to. Your library might be super tiny in a very small community, so you might just want to put, 4 or 5 shelves of tween books at the end of juvenile or at the beginning of teen. Um, Try not to get too hung up on the actual placement of your tween collection. Just having one and having a space that tweens can call their own will be beneficial. That's the main thing. So don't get hung up on the perfect space or the perfect dynamic or any of those things, because you probably aren't going to find one. So just focus on making a space for them, even if it's just 4 shelves somewhere. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about controversy in your tween collection, because there is going to be some controversy, especially as we start dealing with a little bit more of the heavier subjects, like sexual abuse or first kisses, or someone's an alcoholic, or somebody committed suicide, things like that. So we all know that tweens have their right to read, and they can read whatever they want, and we do not act in loco parentis, but we still do need to make sure that we're finding age-appropriate materials and putting them in the appropriate spots. It serves the community better, it serves our tweens better, and it makes everyone a little happier. So, whoops, went the wrong way. And so the Office of Intellectual Freedom, of course, librarians and library governing bodies have a public and professional obligation to ensure that all members of the community they serve have free, equal, and equitable access to the entire range of library resources, regardless of content, approach, or format. The principle of library services applies equally to all users, minors as well as adults. Lack of access to information can be harmful to minors. Librarians and library governing bodies must uphold this principle in order to provide adequate and effective service to minors. So we all know that. And sometimes when you're facing a challenge or a censorship attempt, it can be hard to remember. But it's important for us to stand our ground when it comes to the information and the books that we provide for our patrons. A lot of you probably are familiar with a request for reconsideration of materials. So I would recommend that everyone take a look at that a little bit more in the book, because again, I'm running low on time. So you just want to make sure that you have a policy for challenges if someone does say, I don't think this book belongs in the library. So have a policy, have a form that the patron can fill out. Oftentimes they won't, but sometimes they will, and it makes them feel like they're being heard, which I think is important in any patron interaction. You want to make sure that your library has a process and that you complete that process. Make sure you have your reviews, because you had them when you ordered the book, so make sure you have them if somebody challenges it. And don't be afraid to reevaluate the item. Like I said, sometimes you will buy something and you think, oh, wow, this would make a great tween book. And then, no, maybe it does actually belong in teen. And there's nothing wrong with that. We can read the reviews, but until you get that book in your hand, you can't be 100% sure where you think it belongs. And bibliotherapy, why we need problem novels. You want to make sure that you have novels that have issues in them: alcoholism, anxiety, mental health issues, gender identity, child abuse, maybe bullying, suicide, things like that. Just make sure that you have items in your collection for those kids who probably aren't going to ask for them, but will be very appreciative when they find them. Okay, so nonfiction. Do you want to add nonfiction, or should you add nonfiction? This is a question that is completely up to each individual library and librarian. Nonfiction tween collections are great. They really are. You can have report-worthy books, which are going to consist of things that are going to help them with school, anything that they can use to write a report or write an essay or create a presentation. And you can talk to media specialists in your school district about that. You can look at the Common Core, since Michigan does use the Common Core for their education standards. So those are things that you can do to figure out if you want your nonfiction collection to focus on report-worthy books. Maybe you just want some self-help and just for fun books. Maybe you want books that just deal with, you know, helping kids throughout the growing up process, because middle school's tough. It's tough for a lot of reasons. So if you can have books for them that deal with how their body is changing and how their feelings are changing and how to deal with friendships and how to deal with teachers and how to deal with parents, and maybe even things that will help them become more mindful and things that help them deal with the stress. I've always felt bad that people think that kids aren't under stress. Kids are under tremendous stress, from being overscheduled to being pushed to succeed to, you know, having the latest technology to not having the latest technology. There's so much that goes into being a tween. So providing some sort of nonfiction materials to help them through that can be very beneficial. Or you can just have fun stuff, crafting, gardening, cooking, video games, YouTube guides, makeup and hairstyling, just something that would be fun for them to read. Books about sports teams or athletes, actresses, actors, you know, the next YouTube sensation. All of those things make great additions to a tween nonfiction collection. But if you don't have the space or the time, or you don't think you definitely need a nonfiction collection, it's certainly not a requirement to make a satisfactory tween collection. So who buys what? So if you are lucky enough to have more than one librarian working in your youth department, you divvy up duties in some way. Somebody may be purchasing the books for birth through grade 6, and then somebody may be purchasing the books for 6 to 12. So how do you decide which one buy those tween books? There's a couple of ways you can do this. Somebody might just want to buy the tween books. Say, hey, you know what? I love this age group, but I want to buy all the stuff. If you're cool with it, I'm cool with it. So that might work. Or maybe you want to go based on genre. You know, some people love mysteries and realistic fiction, and other people love those sci-fi and fantasy books. So maybe you want to purchase based on that. However it works best for your library is how you decide who buys what. The main thing is you want to make sure that you guys are talking to each other. And remember that there's no ownership in any of the collections. I am lucky enough that I have a decent sized staff and we all have our own collections. I do buy the tween books, and I have a librarian who buys the juvenile fiction books and a librarian who buys the teen books. And every once in a while, one of us will order something and we'll be like, oh boy, that's not exactly where this should go. So we give it to the other person. Also, some vendors are really cool that you can see what other libraries in your building are purchasing, so you don't have the duplicates. If you don't have that capability, then it is super important for you to make sure that you're talking to your other librarians. Or you might just be a department of one. And if that's the case, you do all of the purchasing, and it might even be a little bit easier because then you can just decide when the books come in where you think they would work best. Simple purchasing decisions. You want to make sure the character is in middle school. The reviews recommend it for grades 5 to 8. You want to see what the storyline is about. Is it a coming of age storyline? Are they dealing with major life changes? Are they dealing with some sort of tragedy? Bullying, suicide, gender identity, those types of things. First romance and first kisses. If there's any violence, you probably want to make sure that it's not super graphic. And the books may contain nudity and mild swearing. And again, what mild swearing constitutes is going to be dependent on your demographic. When you're looking at budgets, so you don't necessarily need any more money. You just need to reallocate how the money is spent. So there's samples of budgets on page 100 in the book. And I just did 10,000, 15,000, 25,000, and the ever elusive 50,000. And you can kind of see, so this is how the money might be divvied up before you have a tween collection, and then you see how it might be divvied up after you create your tween collection. So in this instance, we just took some money from juvenile fiction, we took a little bit of money from juvenile nonfiction, and we took a little bit of money from teen fiction, and we threw it over into to tween. So that is the easiest way to do that, I think. And again, if you're the person who is budgeting, if you have just one budget and it just goes from birth to age 18, then you might divvy up your budget completely differently. But this is just an example if each individual group does actually get their own set of funds. So, and I have more budgets in the slides as well. So now you have your tween collection and you're super excited about it, and people come in and they start wondering what it is. Here are some simple talking points for you. You want to talk about how the collection bridges the gap between juvenile and teen. You want to talk about how these books deal with typical middle school issues like bullying, changing family dynamics, increasing athletic and academic competition, and interpersonal relationships. And that this collection was created with middle schoolers in mind. So those are all very important things to bring up to people when they ask about it. But this collection, you don't really have to do a whole lot of marketing for it. It's going to market itself. People are really going to love it. You will be pleasantly surprised by the amount of positive feedback you get from having a tween collection. So, so just kind of in closing, important factors to remember: know your community. Tween collections do not limit readers, they actually empower them. It's not about reading levels. Finding the appropriate books for the intended audience in terms of storyline, characters, and overall themes. Communication is key. Make sure you're talking to your staff and your patrons. The early adolescent years are full of massive changes, both physically and emotionally. Understanding what tweens want can help you to serve them better, and giving tweens a collection and a place to call their own will help them to be lifelong library users. And you're also probably not going to lose those kids that might fall off in 5th, 6th grade, and then you have a hard time getting them back when they're in high school. So I have a couple of useful websites for you here. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the We Need Diverse Books, Reading While White, and the Michigan Electronic Library. One that you might not be familiar with is Brightly. It's a website for parents and educators, and I have found it to be an extremely useful website when selecting tween books. So I would encourage everyone to check that one out. And then here's some resources for some reviews and about me. So I think I just got in under the hour. I got to talking, so I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I am always available by email. It's the best way to get a hold of me because we all know that sitting in our office as a librarian does not happen very often. So thank you, everyone. Are there any questions, Kathy?
Thank you, Karen. You get a gold star. You came in just under 3 o'clock here.
All right, very good.
There have not been really any questions. If you guys have anything you'd like to share, questions, or your own experiences with tween space, we have about a minute and a half if you want to get that in the chat box. But meanwhile, I'd like to remind everyone that creating a tween collection should have already arrived at your library or be arriving in the next day or so. They were shipped out starting at the end of last week to all those that were registered. And also a quick reminder to please ask or to please share with your coworkers that this book should be coming in. We've had a number of calls to our shipper saying, "Where did this book come from?" From library staff that were opening the mail and didn't see your names, but it should be addressed to all of our attendees. So that's available. I'm not seeing anybody type in the chat box. Catherine responded that Brightly is excellent, and I'll second that. I do like to get their newsletter from Brightly as well. You can sign up for an e-newsletter. So thank you everyone very much for today.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Okay, just something else to remember. In the book as well, there are 4 case studies from other libraries who have created Tween collections, and I believe all of the contact information for those librarians is in the book as well, and I'm sure any one of them would be willing to help you out as well. They were great in helping me compile some information, so please make sure to check out those case studies.
Yeah, those are great, and those are back in the appendixes as well. And all of Karen's chapters go into great depth and great information about what she covered here today, including a chapter on marketing your Tween collection, which we just didn't really have time for today. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Karen, for sharing with us today.